Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the second shelf and to the new books of the second month, 2021, new releases in February. As always, I look at the upcoming releases and I pick the ones that I personally find interesting or I'm curious about. So let's get started, as always, with general fiction. And February is Black History Month, so I also try to at least have half of the books that I'm talking about written by authors of color. And the first one is also a debut from an author from Barbados, Sherry Jones. And the title is something that I somehow mixing up in my mind all the time, so I'm going to look down to say it. How the One-Armed Sister Sweeps Her House. Isn't that a fabulous title? I mean, I want to read this book just for the title alone. And the book was already published yesterday, the 2nd of February. As I said, Jones is a debut author, and the book is set in Barbados and centers around the clash, if you will, between the expats with a lot of money and the local population, who oftentimes has the position of servant. And we follow four people of Barbados who try to escape their past. That's what the blurb tells me, and the violence and the drug dealing involved in their lives. Like I said, I would have picked this book probably because I'm shallow, I know, no matter what, because of this incredibly, I think the title is fantastic, The One-Armed Sister. I have all kinds of images, but the fact that it's Black History Month, and also that I haven't read that much, I shamefully admit, from the Caribbean. And so an author from Barbados, a debut author, that immediately sparked my interest, and I thought the story sounded really interesting as well. So I was curious, and The One-Armed Sister Who Sweeps Her House made it in for the new releases in February for the category General Fiction. On to the next category, Nonfiction, and I have two books for this category, and one of which also is by a person of color, a memoir, Rebecca Carroll, Surviving the White Gaze, also published yesterday on the 2nd of February. Rebecca Carroll is an US-American writer and cultural critic and radio, do you say producer with radio? She makes radio. She was born in 1969, and this is an account of her early life, her childhood and coming of age. She was born in, she was the only, I shouldn't say she was born, that's not true because she was adopted, but she was the only Black person growing up in New Hampshire, adopted by white parents, and then she meets her birth mother, also a white woman, and the question of her Black identity is questioned by her mother because of the mixed race, obviously. I'm only telling you what I read about the book because I haven't read it, but it sounded important, but also fascinating, how you would come to your own identity, also your racial identity, if you grew up in this white environment, but then also if you encounter your birth mother who questions your Black identity. I thought that sounds fascinating, and I like Rebecca Carroll as a cultural critic, so I have really high hopes for this memoir. Very much looking forward to reading Surviving the White Gaze. And the second book in the nonfiction category is a book about one of my personal interests, and that's feminism and the history of women. And the book is by Rosalind Miles, also has been published already yesterday. Rosalind Miles was born in 1943 in Kent in the UK, but she lives now partly in Los Angeles and partly in Great Britain. She writes fiction and nonfiction. You might know her as a biographer. She wrote, I think in the 1990s, it was a biography of Elizabeth I. And this book, I should probably tell you the title of the book, The Women's History of the Modern World. You could already, you saw the title already because I put up the cover. Duh. Anyway, so this is an overview of important, some forgotten, some not forgotten women in the Western world from 200 years ago until the present. So there is Simone de Beauvoir, who is not forgotten, but there are also women who we might not know or remember. And I love these kind of, overviews, history. And then you can decide where you want to take a deeper dive. And I like Rosalind Miles' work. I like her writing style. So I'm really excited to read this one about women in history, forgotten women and not so forgotten. So let me say the title again, The Women's History of the Modern World, published yesterday. Next up is translated fiction. And for this category, I had to pick a book translated by Tina Cover. I wanted to say our very own Tina Cover because she appears now and then in videos, Zoom chats made by Sean. So it feels like she's our own, even though she doesn't do BookTube. But anyway, the book I'm talking about is by Cécile Coulon, A Beast in Paradise, and it will be published in the translation by Tina Cover tomorrow, 4th of February. It was published in France 3 years ago, 2019. Cécile Coulon was born in 1990, and she is, for me, a very young writer because she's only 30 years old, but she has already published a couple of books, so this is not her debut. It's about the connection between women and land. That's what I understood. But Tina talked about the book in one of the Zoom chats that I mentioned much better. So I'm sorry, Tina, if I butcher the story here. But we follow mainly the story of Blanche when she is a young woman, a young girl, still teenage girl, 16, and she falls in love with Alexandre. And Blanche lives on the land owned by her mother or grandmother. The blurb says grandmother, but in one of the reviews it said grandmother Emilienne. And the connection to the land is strong, but when Blanche and Alexandre get together, he wants to go to the city to make his mark. So that is the central conflict, if you will. But again, I have to tell you, I would have picked this book anyway because it is translated by Tina Cover, and she thought it was a really good book. So I was sold immediately, and I've never heard of this author. So it's also for me a new author to discover, Cécile Coulon. And so this book, A Beast in Paradise, made it without further ado and much reflection, I have to admit, into the new releases for February. And as always, we end the new releases, my picks of the new releases, with SciFi. And I could not pick this book, the new sci-fi novel by Becky Chambers, which will be published, let me check, I think on the 16th the 16th of February. And it's called, the name would be helpful as well, The Galaxy and the Ground Within. Picture. And Becky Chambers, I love her. This is the 4th in the Wayfarer series, which is more a cycle than a series because it's not a story in multiple parts, but they are independent books. And I have to say the second one, Closed and Common Orbit, was my favorite. I liked the other two as well, but the second one was my favorite. And this one sounds, again, fascinating. So we have this planet, quite desolate planet, which is nothing more than a truck stop, if you will. So people people of all sorts, whether they are human people or alien people, they stop there to get fuel. So it's a sort of a truck stop idea. And the truck stop, which is called Five Hop, is run by a woman and her sometimes helpful and sometimes not so helpful children. And then, due to some technical failure, 3 or 4 people are stranded on this planet in this Five Hop truck stop. And then, of course, plot ensues from there. I mean, doesn't that sound fascinating and brilliant and in the hands of Becky Chambers? I'm sure that there will be all kinds of weird encounters and stories. I love the idea that you take something that is so familiar for us now, the truck stop, or when you go on the highway and you have these, Motel 6 kind of where you just stop to get fuel and food, and then you are stuck there with all kinds of people. Yeah, I don't know. It's probably just me, but I thought it sounded really, really interesting and engaging. So anyway, this was the last one, the sci-fi one. My picks for new releases in February, they're quite, February seems to be picking up in terms of the amount of new releases, even though we're still in the pandemic. So it was not like I had to search for new releases. So I'm sure that there are other new releases out there that you might be more interested in. Let me know if that's the case. I hope you enjoyed the ones that I picked. Thank you very much for watching. As always, looking forward to your comments, and I'll see you all soon in the next one.